A blade meant for her cut him instead, and she broke every rule to heal him. The air in the grand chamber of Cygnus Prime was a relic, heavy with the dust of 10,000 years of incense and the silent, crushing weight of expectation. From his place in the ambassadorial gallery, Finn watched Nyxil kneel. She was a figure carved from twilight and resolve, her skin the deep, impossible blue of a world's edge dusk, a shade that seemed to drink the light. A cascade of hair the color of violet magenta fell over one shoulder, a shocking banner of life against the cold ancestral stone of the Ascension dais. She was alone up there, the focus of a million gazes, yet appearing more isolated than anyone in the cavernous hall. He'd known her for 6 standard months, a series of formal, nerve-wracking meetings where his earnest human diplomacy had collided with her polished imperial reserve. He saw the strength in her, coiled beneath the perfect posture and the precisely metered words. A warrior's discipline held in a queen's poise. Her long, tapered ears, which would twitch almost imperceptibly at a poorly chosen phrase, were still now, locked in regal stillness. She was to be their empress. His mission was to ensure humanity had a friend in her. His private hope was simply to understand the woman beneath the diadem of stars that was now descending toward her brow. The ancient crown, a web of shimmering filaments and captured starlight, hovered over her, held in a stasis field. The final chant of the high priest began, the guttural syllables echoing in the profound silence. Finn's gaze drifted from Nyxil to the assembled houses. He saw Lord Vorlog, his primary rival, standing at the fore of his own delegation. Vorlog was the epitome of Cygnian nobility, handsome, sharp, with an aura of cold ambition that was as much a part of him as his own blue skin. He watched the diadem's descent with an unnerving stillness, his hands clasped behind his back. Then Finn saw it, a flicker of movement. Not from Vorlog himself, but from an aide at his side, a glint of light from a device held low, shielded from the view of the dais. It was aimed at Nyxil. It wasn't a weapon Finn recognized, no barrel, no energy signature he could detect, but his instincts, honed over a decade in the Terran Marine Corps, screamed danger. There was no time to analyze, no time to shout a warning that would be lost in the echoing chant. There was only time to act. He vaulted the gallery railing before his brain had fully processed the decision. He landed hard on the marbled floor 10 feet below, his knees and ankles absorbing the shock with a grunt of pain. He ignored the gasps, the sudden commotion from the Imperial Guard. He had eyes only for Nyxil, a still, blue flame on the distant dais. He sprinted, his armored boots slapping against the polished stone, weaving through stunned dignitaries. He saw the faint shimmer in the air, a tiny distortion heading directly for her kneeling form. A projectile. He reached her in a final, desperate lunge, shoving his body between her and the trajectory of the attack. He felt no impact, no piercing sting. For a heart-stopping second, he thought he'd been wrong. Then a sensation of cold fire bloomed across his left side, just under his ribs. It wasn't a cut. It felt like being injected with ice and acid. He stumbled, a harsh cry torn from his throat, his armored glove scraping the dais as he fell. The ceremony shattered. The chant died. The diadem froze in its descent. He looked down and saw nothing but a pinprick on his uniform, a tiny tear in the fabric. But the pain was immense, a deep internal unraveling. He looked up, his vision already starting to blur at the edges. The last thing he saw clearly was Nyxil's face. The perfect, regal mask had vanished, replaced by a look of raw shock. She broke her posture, broke 1,000 years of tradition and surged forward, her hands hovering over his chest as she knelt beside him on the cold, ancient stone. The imperial sanctum of healing smelled of sterile metallic salts and the faint, cloying sweetness of failing biology. Finn lay on a diagnostic plinth, bathed in the soft glow of humming archways that mapped every cell in his body. The pain had subsided into a deep, systemic ache, a feeling of being fundamentally wrong. He felt loose, as if the mortar holding his bricks together was turning to sand. He could hear voices outside the transparent wall of his isolation chamber. Nyxil's was a low, tense contralto. The other, a dry, grating baritone, belonged to the chief healer. "The weapon is unlike anything we have ever encountered," the healer said, his tone a mixture of clinical fascination and disdain. He was a tall, wizened Cygnian, his magenta hair faded to a pale rose, his face a roadmap of arrogant wrinkles. It is not a poison. It is a retrovirus, a tailored gene scythe. It was designed to latch onto a very specific set of markers in your DNA, Empress, and sever the sequences that govern fertility. In him, he gestured a long blue finger toward Finn. In the human, it finds no purchase. His genome is a chaotic mess of redundancies and stubborn, primitive resilience. But the weapon persists. It cannot perform its primary function, so it defaults to its secondary protocol: total cellular degradation. It is rewriting his biology into an unsustainable paradox. His own immune system is fighting back with a ferocity I'll admit is remarkable, but it is a war it cannot win. He is dissolving from the inside out. You can stop it, can you not? Nixel's voice was stripped of all ceremony. It was sharp, demanding. No, we cannot. It has bonded with his cells. To purge it would be to purge him. He has a day, perhaps less. My condolences on the loss of your associate. The final word was layered with dismissive contempt. Finn closed his eyes. So that was it. A stupid, impulsive gesture, and he was dead meat on an alien slab 1,000 light-years from home. He thought of Earth, of the rain in Vancouver, of the taste of real coffee. He felt a surge of hot, pointless anger. He heard the healer depart. Then a softer voice, one he recognized as belonging to Alara, Nixel's closest aide. Your Highness, you must distance yourself. Lord Vorlag is already spinning this. He claims your association with this off-worlder has brought ill omen to the dawn of your reign. He says it is a sign of your weakness. He says this while his own hand is still warm from launching the blade meant for me, Nixel countered, her voice dangerously quiet. We cannot prove that, Alara urged, her tone laced with pragmatic desperation. For now, the human is a political liability, a tragic footnote. You must let it go. Focus on the consolidation of your power. A long silence followed. Finn found himself holding his breath, waiting for the logical, sensible proclamation that would seal his fate. But it didn't come. The door to his chamber hissed open. Nixel stepped inside, her powerful form silhouetted against the stark light of the corridor. The scent of her, something like cool night air and rare, blooming minerals, filled the space. She walked to his side, her twilight blue eyes fixed on his face. He saw no pity in them. He saw a storm, a familiar controlled fury he had only ever glimpsed before. Ambassador Finn, she said, her voice formal but resonating with an unfamiliar current. Just Finn, he rasped, his throat dry. She gave a single sharp nod. Finn, you took a blow meant for me. In my culture, that creates a debt that cannot be ignored. Forget the debt, he managed. Just nail Vorlag to a wall for me. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps even amusement, crossed her features. His time will come. But first, we will address this. She gestured to the diagnostic displays that showed his systems failing in a cascade of crimson alerts. There is one path. It is forbidden. It has not been attempted in 500 generations. The healers will not speak of it. But I have read the old texts, the ones my ancestors deemed too absolute. She looked away from him then at the far wall, as if speaking to the ghosts of her entire lineage. They will say I am defiling the bloodline. They will say I am elevating a primitive to a station he cannot comprehend. Let them. I will not begin my reign as a coward who allows an ally to die in my place. She turned back, her gaze boring into his. The choice, however, must be yours. The price is not small. It will bind you, to me, to the ascendancy, in ways you cannot yet imagine. He didn't need to imagine, he just needed to live. I'm a Marine, Your Highness. We're not great at dying quietly. The corner of her lip tilted, a fractional movement that was more potent than a full smile. Empress, and soon you will have to learn to call me by my name. She strode from the room, leaving Finn in a silence that was no longer filled with despair, but with a terrifying, exhilarating spark of hope. The chamber of the first bond was cold. Not the sterile cold of the sanctum, but a deep, ancient cold that seemed to emanate from the very atoms of the stone. It was a circular room, its walls devoid of markings, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center stood the artifact. It was a sculpture of living metal that shifted in slow, languid patterns, a fluid form of silver and obsidian that twisted into impossible interlocking shapes. It hummed, a low, resonant frequency that vibrated in Finn's bones, making his teeth ache. He stood before it stripped to the waist, the chill of the chamber raising goosebumps on his skin. He felt Nixel's presence beside him, a pillar of warmth and unyielding purpose. The chief healer and 2 acolytes stood by the entrance, their faces masks of grim disapproval. "Empress, I must protest one final time," the healer intoned, his voice echoing in the stark space. "The right of consanguinity is absolute. It does not simply heal, it merges. It overwrites the failing genetic template with the stable one. It will save his life, yes, but it will weave his life force into your own. By the unassailable law of the first emperor, he will be recognized as Prince Consort, an off-worlder, a human." The final word was an indictment. "Your protest is noted, healer." "Again," Nixel replied, her voice cutting through his disapproval like glass. She turned to Finn, her eyes searching his. "There is no turning back from this. The bond will be permanent. You will feel what I feel. My pain will be your pain. My life, your life." "Better than no life at all," Finn said, his own voice sounding thin in the humming silence. He was afraid, but the sight of her defiance in the face of her entire culture's tradition was a strange and powerful balm. He trusted that look. "Then let it be done." She faced the artifact and placed her right palm against its cool, shifting surface. "Place your hand beside mine." He hesitated for a breath, then mirrored her action. The metal was smooth as liquid mercury, yet firm. It molded instantly to the shape of their hands. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a searing, white-hot agony shot up his arm, a pain so intense it dwarfed the cellular decay he'd been enduring. He cried out, his body convulsing. He felt a sympathetic gasp from Nixel, her body tensing beside him. The pain was not just his, it was theirs. The chamber filled with light pouring from the artifact, from the very air. Finn felt a violent, wrenching sensation deep within him, as if his soul were being pulled through a sieve. He was aware of Nixel's consciousness crashing into his own, a vast, ancient ocean of memory and sensation. He felt the weight of her lineage, millennia of queens and warriors, the taste of strange fruits on her tongue, the sorrow of a lost sibling from her childhood, the crushing burden of the crown. It was overwhelming, a tsunami of being. And he felt his own life, short, brutal, vibrant, pour into her. The grit of desert sand in his teeth on Tau Ceti, the terror and exhilaration of his first orbital drop, the face of his mother, laughing in a sunlit garden, the quiet grief for a fallen comrade. His entire chaotic, messy, profoundly human existence was laid bare to her. Then the light vanished. The pain ceased, not fading but cut off as if by a switch. The humming of the artifact fell silent. The chamber was plunged back into cold and shadow. Finn swayed, his knees weak. Nixel's hand shot out, steadying him, her grip firm on his bare arm. Her touch felt different, familiar. The barrier between them was gone. In the quiet recesses of his mind, he could feel a new steady rhythm, a presence that was not his own, but was now part of him. A low, constant hum in his blood. He looked at her, truly looked at her. Her magenta hair was disheveled, her blue skin slick with a fine sheen of sweat. Her eyes, when they met his, were wide with a shocked, mirrored intimacy. The Empress was gone. In her place was Nixel. And he was no longer just Finn. He woke to the scent of something floral and sharp and the feel of impossibly soft fabric against his skin. He was in a bed, a vast circular platform in the center of an opulent chamber. Sunlight filtered through crystalline panes, painted shifting patterns on the floor. The ache in his body was gone, replaced by a thrum of vitality he hadn't felt in years. He sat up, the silken sheets pooling around his waist. He felt whole, more than whole. He felt the low, steady hum of the bond, a quiet companion in the back of his mind, and with it a faint echo of another's awareness, a sense of calm, focused attention. Nixel. The door slid open and she entered, dressed not in ceremonial robes but in a simple dark blue tunic that matched her skin. She carried a tray. Alara, her aide, followed a pace behind, her expression a careful, neutral mask that failed to hide her deep disapproval. "You are awake," Nixel stated. It wasn't a question. He realized with a jolt that she had felt his consciousness stir. "Feels that way," he said, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. The room was clearly her private quarters. His armor was cleaned and polished on a stand in the corner. His side didn't even have a scar. "The political firestorm has begun," she said, setting the tray on a low table. It held 2 bowls of a steaming pearlescent broth and a flask of water. "Lord Vorlag has formally challenged the right. He has accused me of heresy, of polluting the imperial line with primitive stock. She said the words without inflection, but Finn felt a flicker of her cold rage through the bond, like a distant shimmer of heat. He is rallying the outer houses. He claims I am unfit to rule. So, saving my life was bad politics, Finn surmised, standing up. He felt a little unsteady, not from weakness, but from the sheer strangeness of it all. It was an act of war, she corrected him, her eyes intense. One I chose to initiate. You are now the center of that war. You are no longer Ambassador Finn. You are Prince Consort of the Cygnian Ascendancy, my consort. Alara flinched at the title. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and unbelievable. Prince Consort, him, he ran a hand through his dark hair. Any chance I can abdicate? None, Nixel said flatly. The bond is law. You are bound to me, and I to you. Your status is now as immutable as my own. She gestured to the food. You should eat. Your human physiology requires more frequent energy intake than ours. He sat, suddenly ravenous. As he picked up the spoon, he felt a flicker of something from her. Curiosity. The broth was warm, with a complex, savory flavor unlike anything he'd ever tasted. As the warmth spread through his stomach, he felt an echo of her palate experiencing it with him. A faint, secondary taste sensation in his own mind. It was deeply unsettling and bizarrely intimate. He glanced at her. She was watching him, her expression unreadable, but he could feel her processing the shared sensation. The foreignness of his human digestive response, the way his body processed the nutrients. She picked up her own bowl, and as she sipped the broth, he felt it in return. The familiar, comforting taste as she experienced it, the sense of home and tradition it represented for her. It was like tasting a memory. This was the bond, not just life and death, but this constant, subtle, involuntary sharing. He was a gaping hole in her privacy, and she in his. Later, as Nixel was at a holographic console reviewing star charts of systems loyal to Vorlag, Finn stood by the window, looking out over the capital city. The weight of his new reality was settling in. He was a prisoner in a gilded cage, the source of a looming civil war. He pressed his forehead against the cool crystal, trying to center himself. A sudden, stabbing pain lanced through his skull. He cried out, dropping to one knee, his hands flying to his temples. It wasn't his pain. It was sharp, cold, and laced with a chillingly familiar ambition. Images flooded his mind, not his own. He saw the star chart Nixel was looking at, but from a different angle, across a dark, metal desk. He heard a voice, a cold, calculating baritone, dictating orders. Reroute the Third Fleet through the Keltos Nebula. Their primary targets will be the communication relays on Cygnus Secundus. Plunge the Loyalist systems into silence before they can coordinate a defense. It was Vorlag's voice. Finn was seeing through his eyes, hearing his thoughts. The pain subsided, leaving him gasping on the floor. Nixel was instantly at his side, her hands on his shoulders. Finn, what is it? What did you feel? He looked up at her, his face pale with sweat and horror. I saw him, he choked out. I saw Vorlag. I heard him. He's planning to attack the relays. She stared at him, her twilight eyes widening as the terrifying implication dawned on both of them at once. The gene scythe. The rite of consanguinity hadn't just healed him by linking their life forces. The weapon had been designed with a synaptic interface, a backdoor for control. The rite hadn't cleansed it. It had simply transferred the connection point. To him. He wasn't just a political liability anymore. He was a direct, open channel into the mind of their greatest enemy. The revelation hung between them, a new and terrible intimacy. He was a walking wiretap, a psychic spy. And the link that bound him to her, the very thing that had saved his life, was now the most dangerous weapon in the Empire. They were no longer just protector and protected, empress and consort. They were conspirators, bound by a secret that could either save her empire or tear it, and them, apart. The human who had become a symbol of her defiance was now her only hope, an unwilling weapon cloaked in the scandal of his own existence. Their world shrank to the confines of her private wing of the palace. He was a secret too volatile to be revealed, a weapon too precious to be exposed. His human security chief, a stern woman named Eva Rostova, had demanded his immediate extraction, her face a grim mask of fury over the encrypted comm. He's compromised, Empress, Rostova's voice had crackled, sharp with suspicion. His biology, his neurology, it's an unknown quantity. He is a security risk to Terra and to himself. I am invoking diplomatic immunity and recalling my ambassador." "He is no longer your ambassador," Nixel had replied, her voice leaving no room for argument. "He is the prince consort of this empire, and he is staying." The line had gone dead. Now they were truly alone. They began to explore the connection, cautiously, like two people handling an unexploded bomb. It was a harrowing exercise in trust. For Finn to receive anything from Vorlog, he had to lower his own mental guards, leaving himself vulnerable. For Nixel, she had to act as his anchor, her mind a steadying presence against the cold intrusion of Vorlag's ambition. The process was more intimate than any physical touch. She felt the jagged edges of his past losses, the deep well of grief for a family he never spoke of. He, in turn, felt the immense weight of her duty, the loneliness of a crown she had not yet fully claimed. "Focus," she would murmur, her voice a soft anchor in the chaos of his mind. They discovered that physical contact amplified their connection, strengthened their defenses. Her hand on his arm, her fingers resting at his temple, these small points of contact became lifelines. He would sit, eyes closed, while she guided him through the Signian mental disciplines, techniques for creating silent spaces in the mind. "He is thinking of supply lines," Finn whispered one afternoon, his brow furrowed in concentration. Nixel's hand was resting on the back of his neck, her thumb tracing slow circles against his skin. "He's diverting munitions transports, ships disguised as grain haulers, heading for the Viridian cluster." It was a minor detail, but it was actionable. Nixel moved swiftly. Without revealing her source, she dispatched a loyalist patrol to intercept the transports. 2 days later, the news broke. A squadron of Vorlog ships, illegally camouflaged and carrying advanced weaponry, had been captured. It was a small victory, but it sent a shockwave through the council. Nixel's mysterious intelligence was sound. Her position strengthened, just slightly. But their success had a price. Vorlog felt the psychic reverberation. He didn't know how or why, but he knew his plans had been compromised. He became paranoid, his thoughts turning inward, becoming harder for Finn to read, and he began to push back. He sensed the psychic intrusion not as a person, but as an anomaly, a persistent static on the edge of his consciousness. He started projecting psychic feedback down the link, jagged shards of pain, waves of disorienting noise, flashes of violent imagery. Finn was plagued by nightmares. He would wake in a cold sweat, the phantom pain of a plasma burn across his chest, the metallic taste of fear in his mouth. The attacks came without warning. During one shared meal, he suddenly dropped his fork, his face paling as a wave of cold dread washed over him. Vorlog's fury at the loss of his ships. Nixel felt the echo of it, a sickening lurch in her own gut. Without thinking, she reached across the table and clasped his hand. Her warmth, her steadiness flowed into him, a bulwark against the tide. The dread receded, leaving him shaken but whole. "He knows," Finn breathed, his knuckles white where she gripped them. "He knows someone is listening." "Then we must be more careful," she said, but her own mind was racing. They had a weapon, but it was a double-edged sword that was carving Finn apart. The dynamic between them had shifted irrevocably. The formal distance was gone, burned away by shared pain and forced intimacy. He saw the vulnerability she hid from her court, the flicker of doubt that she ruthlessly suppressed. She saw the raw courage beneath his easygoing human facade, the stubborn refusal to break that she was beginning to realize was a defining trait of his species. One evening, after a particularly brutal psychic assault from Vorlag had left Finn exhausted and pale, she found him standing on the balcony overlooking the sleeping city. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, coming to stand beside him. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of the palace gardens. "I can find another way." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes shadowed with fatigue. "And let him win? Let him take everything you are, everything you fought for?" "No. I took the hit for you on that dais, Nixel. I'm not going to stop now." It was the first time he had used her name without the formality of her title. It landed between them with a soft, resonant weight. She felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the bond. It was her own. She saw him not as a human, not as a consort, but as Finn, the man who had shielded her. the man who was now fighting a silent war in the depths of his own mind for her. She reached out, her fingers gently touching the side of his face. His skin was warm. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for a brief moment. In that silent contact, a new understanding passed between them. It was no longer just about duty or debt or survival. A fragile, terrifying, and powerful affection was taking root in the scorched earth of their shared crisis. It was a vulnerability neither of them could afford, and a strength they were both beginning to realize they could not live without. Vorlag, enraged and increasingly paranoid, abandoned subtlety. He accelerated his timeline, mobilizing his full armada for a direct assault on Cygnus Prime. The news sent the Imperial Council into a panic. Fleets that had sworn loyalty to the throne wavered, intimidated by Vorlag's brazen show of force. The capital was gripped by fear. But in the quiet seclusion of the Empress's wing, there was no panic. There was only focus. "He's overplaying his hand," Finn said, his eyes closed. He and Nixel were seated on the floor opposite each other, their knees almost touching, his hands resting in hers. The link was a torrent now, a flood of Vorlag's arrogant certainty and tactical commands. "He's so sure of his victory that he isn't shielding anything. I can see it all." For the next cycle, they worked without rest. Finn became a conduit, his mind a canvas upon which Vorlag's entire strategy was painted. Nixel, with her encyclopedic knowledge of Imperial tactics and fleet capabilities, translated the raw data into a daring counteroffensive. She saw the feints, the weaknesses in his formations, the overextended supply lines. She saw the path to a victory that her entire war council deemed impossible. She presented the plan to her generals, a collection of grim-faced, battle-hardened Cygnian males who looked at her with a mixture of loyalty and deep skepticism. "Empress, this strategy is unconventional," the fleet admiral, a grizzled old warrior with a scarred cheek, stated grimly. "It relies on anticipating Lord Vorlag's every move with a prescience that borders on witchcraft. If your intelligence is wrong on even one vector, our home fleet will be decimated." "My intelligence is not wrong, Admiral," Nixel said, her voice ringing with an authority that silenced the room. She stood before them, the weight of her impending reign settling upon her like a mantle of iron. "These are your orders. You will follow them to the letter." She did not tell them the source was the quiet human consort they dismissed as a court scandal. She staked her throne on him. As Vorlag's armada translated from hyperspace into the Cygnus system, a glittering swarm of deadly starlight, Nixel and Finn stood on the command deck of the Imperial flagship, the Indomitable. Finn was dressed in a simple Cygnian naval uniform, standing slightly behind her chair, a silent shadow. The deck crew threw him curious, mistrustful glances. To them, he was an anomaly, a distraction. "His flagship, the Harbinger, is holding its position at the rear of the 3rd Assault Wing," Finn murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "He's using the heavy cruisers as a screen. He intends to break our center and then commit his command ship for the final blow." "A classic arrogant maneuver," Nixel whispered back, her eyes on the main view screen where hostile contact signatures bloomed like a red plague. "Admiral," she commanded, her voice clear and strong, "execute maneuver Epsilon Tenebrae. Let's show him the shadows." The battle began. The Imperial fleet, following Nixel's audacious plan, did not meet Vorlag's charge head-on. Instead, they scattered, flowing around his formations like water, striking at his flanks, his support ships, his vulnerable command carriers. The deck of the Indomitable was a storm of calm, controlled activity, of shouted reports and targeting solutions, and at the heart of the storm was the quiet, constant stream of intelligence flowing from Finn to Nixel. Then Vorlag realized what was happening. He felt the perfect, prescient nature of her response. He understood, in a flash of cold fury, that the psychic interference, the static he had felt, was not just a passive listener. It was his enemy, and he launched his final most vicious attack. It didn't come with pain. It came with a sickening lurch, a feeling of dislocation. Finn gasped, his hands flying to his own console as if to steady himself. But his fingers wouldn't obey. He was a puppet whose strings had just been seized. Vorlag was pouring his will down the psychic channel, not to inflict pain, but to seize control. "You are mine," the thought came, cold and triumphant in Finn's mind. You will deactivate the flagship's shields. You will be the instrument of my victory." "Nixel," Finn choked out, his body rigid, his knuckles white on the console. He was fighting, but it was like wrestling with a ghost. Vorlog's will was a disciplined, surgical instrument. His own was a frantic, desperate struggle. The bridge officers stared, seeing only the prince consort freezing at his station. Nixel saw the truth. Ignoring the admiral's frantic call for a status report, she left her command chair and went to him. She placed her hands on his temples, her thumbs resting on the thin skin. Her touch was a jolt of warmth, of shared identity. "Finn, listen to me," she said, her voice a fierce, urgent whisper that cut through the psychic noise. "Stop fighting him his way. Don't build walls. Don't try to be disciplined. That is his strength. Fight him your way." Your way? What was his way? Chaos, emotion, the messy, unpredictable, illogical storm of being human. He stopped resisting. He stopped trying to build psychic shields or push back with focused will. Instead, he opened the floodgates. He let everything out, everything that he was, and hurled it down the link at Vorlog. He sent the raw, burning grief for the parents he'd lost in the colony wars. He sent the fierce, protective loyalty he felt for his Marine brothers. He sent the terror of his first battle, the bitter taste of failure, the soaring joy of a hard-won victory. He sent the memory of the rain in Vancouver. He sent the gut-wrenching, world-altering love he felt for the blue-skinned woman whose hands were holding his head, whose belief was the only anchor he had left. He unleashed the totality of his chaotic, emotional, profoundly human soul. It was a tidal wave of pure, unstructured feeling, a force of nature. Vorlog's cold, ordered, ambitious mind had no defense against it. He could have deflected a psychic blade, but he could not parry a memory of love. He could have blocked a mental probe, but he could not withstand a tidal wave of grief. The psychic link, overloaded with the raw, beautiful, terrible power of a human heart, shattered. On the view screen, the command lights on Vorlog's flagship, the Harbinger, flickered once, then went dark. A chain reaction of explosions blossomed along its spine. The ship, its command structure decapitated, its will extinguished, drifted silently into the void. Silence fell on the command deck of the Indomitable. The crew stared at the dying ship of their enemy, then at their empress and her strange human consort who was sagging against his console, breathing in deep, ragged gasps, free. In the aftermath, the Grand Council of Houses convened. Vorlog's rebellion, deprived of its head, had collapsed. The lords and ladies who had sided with him now stood before the Ascension dais, their heads bowed, their futures in the hands of the empress they had sought to depose. Nixel stood before them, not in armor, but in the simple, dark robes of a ruler. Beside her, a step behind, stood Finn. He was no longer a scandal, he was a mystery, a miracle, the quiet human who had somehow been instrumental in the impossible victory. The Ascendancy has long believed its strength lies in the purity of its bloodline, in the traditions of its past. Nixel's voice rang through the silent chamber. It has been a source of pride. It has also been a source of stagnation and weakness. Today, that changes. Our strength was not found in our traditions, but in the courage to defy them. It was not found in our purity, but in an alliance with a species we deemed primitive. She turned slightly, her hand finding Finn's. She drew him forward to stand beside her, an equal. Their fingers interlaced, a simple public declaration that resounded louder than any edict. "This is the Prince Consort," she declared, her gaze sweeping over the assembled nobility. "His heart and his courage are the foundation upon which this new era will be built. Our future will be defined not by the purity we hoard, but by the strength we share." Later, in the quiet of her chambers, the weight of ceremony fell away. The Empire was safe. Her reign was secure. But the galaxy seemed to fade into insignificance in the space between them. He stood on the balcony looking at the stars, and she came to stand behind him, her arms sliding around his waist, her cheek resting against his back. The hum of the bond was still there, a soft, constant music beneath the surface of their thoughts. It was no longer a sign of crisis, no longer a weapon, it was a promise. "Is it always so loud inside your head?" she murmured, her voice laced with a gentle, teasing warmth. He chuckled, a low, relaxed sound, and covered her hands with his own. "You have no idea." He could feel her smile against his back. They stood in silence for a long time, watching the lights of the capital city glitter below. He was a human who had fallen for a queen from the stars. She was an empress who had broken every rule for a man from a world she had never seen. They were bound by a forbidden ritual, by shared battle, by a psychic connection that had laid their souls bare to one another. He turned in her arms, his hands framing her face, his thumb gently stroking her blue skin. Her twilight eyes held his, and in their depths he saw not an empress, but Nixel, his Nixel. "So," he said softly, "what happens now, Empress?" A slow smile spread across her face, transforming her regal features into something beautiful and breathtakingly real. "Now, my consort," she whispered, her lips just a breath from his, "you and I begin to rule."